What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Real Time for the real everyday movie fan. It's been a long time since I've gotten one of these up, but thank you very much for joining us because we are here today with a very cool individual, Mr. David Block, who's a longtime animator and animation director at Disney and other studios. Awesome filmography. Mr. Block, thanks so much for being here today with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for those who don't know you, your career, we were just talking, saying you've done stuff outside of Disney, but a huge portion of it is obviously at Disney,
Mhm.
especially in Disney television, directing things, everything from the DuckTales to Kim Possible. So why don't we take it back to the beginning? Because the earliest credit you have is in 1975. So let's go back before then, and talk about where are you from, about when you were born, where, and when you felt like you needed to get into animation.
Okay. I was born, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. Um, and I went to a very academic high school, not had no art department. So I had no opportunity to know if I had any artistic ability or not, other than the fact that I grew up in the 60s and shows like The Flintstones and Top Cat and Rocky and Bullwinkle and that whole array stable of Hanna-Barbera characters, Huckleberry Hound, Quick Draw McGraw, they were all on television. And TV, of course, really hit it big in the 60s. The first TVs came out in the late 50s. So um, the only thing I knew was that if I watched a television show, a cartoon show, I usually could draw those characters in
Mm.
a very short amount of time. Um, so um, the high school I went to, like I said, had no artistic department. So I really didn't know. And growing up in Cincinnati, who thinks about going into animation?
Yeah.
No one. But however, in my freshman year of college, I went to see the movie Fantasia
Mm.
for the first time and had a moment there. Literally went into the movie and came out of the movie and said, "That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to do that." And I was a Disney fan. I mean, you waited every 3 or 4 years for another feature to come out into the theaters, and I always went. So I was, already a fan, but the idea of making that a career move was just so far removed from growing up in Cincinnati. I mean, California was so removed from growing up in Cincinnati. So, but I did decide to do that, and I switched to my first art school, and that was in Chicago. And I went there for 2 years, and then I transferred out to. I knew I had to get to Los Angeles. I
Hmm.
knew that's where animation was. So after 2 years in Chicago, where I finally got some art education under my belt, I was able to get into the Art Center College of Design, which was a very prestigious school here in Los Angeles and still is. And I came out here thinking, I'm finally going to get some schooling in animation. But Art Center really, what they had in their catalog was not quite what they had in reality.
Hmm.
So after one semester, I dropped out of Art Center, and then a lot of really wonderful things started happening for me. Dropping out was one of the best moves I ever made, and I met one man uh, uh, who was an animator,
Hmm.
and he introduced me to a man named Ben Washam. Now, Ben Washam was a top animator for Chuck Jones. Worked on all the great Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Beep Beep the Roadrunner cartoons. He was one of Chuck's top guys and actually co-directed with Chuck How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And I met Ben, and long story short, Ben became my first mentor. And so I studied under Ben for about 6 months, and that evolved into my very first job in the business, which was working for Chuck Jones.
Hmm.
Now, back in 1974, working for Chuck Jones, people in my generation generally would get jobs at Filmation, which was a very large studio back then, and Hanna-Barbera. They were the kingpins of Saturday morning television.
Hmm.
But I wanted to have my first job be on a level much higher than that.
Mm.
I didn't want to work for the Saturday morning trade.
Hmm.
Um, and so I kind of held out, and it worked out for me. So my first job ever was working for Chuck on a primetime animated special called Rudyard Kipling's Rikki Tikki Tavi.
Yes.
And um, I worked there for a very short time because, as it turned out, Chuck didn't even have the money in his budget to pay me the $208 a week that In-Betweener was making back then. But he knew that if he gave me this job, even for a short, brief time, it would open a lot of doors.
Mm.
And it did. It was one of the kindest things anybody, it was just a moment that I'll never forget.
Mm.
So just a few weeks with Chuck opened up almost every door in Hollywood except for Walt Disney.
Hmm.
That was the pinnacle.
Yeah.
But a lot of other studios then wanted me um, because A, I was young, really young, and B, a young person rarely got a job at Chuck Jones. They were all the people that taught me there at Chuck's were incredibly famous veteran artists in the animation business. So I got some really good training at Chuck's. And then one of his proteges, a guy named Abe Levito, hired me right away. And Abe had his own studio in Hollywood. Chuck's was in Hollywood, Abe was in Hollywood.
Hmm.
And Abe actually had his studio was on the second floor of the original Walter Lantz
Oh,
studios.
cool.
And Walter Lantz had the second largest animation studio, second only to Walt Disney. So it was a large building that wasn't, I mean, they weren't producing anything anymore.
Hmm.
But what was so cool about it was that A, Walter would show up from time to time, and B, he hadn't taken anything out of the studio from the days of Woody Woodpecker and Andy Panda. So all that equipment, all those cells, all those drawings were still there. And I was into history. I loved the old stuff. I loved meeting these old guys. So I was having a ball. And I stayed with Abe um, for about almost a year until he passed away.
Mm.
And he kept his illness a secret. And he was scheduled to take a hiatus from his own studio and be a co director on a feature called Raggedy Ann and Andy.
Hmm.
And he was going in with Richard Williams, the famous Richard Williams from England.
Hmm.
And they were going to make this movie with Raggedy Ann and Andy with a lot of, oh my, yeah, I was like the who's who of veteran animators who weren't still at Disney.
Hmm.
And so even though Abe was not going to be doing it, he recommended me to the picture. And so again, I was a very young person. Now I was an assistant animator
Hmm.
and still considered really young for the business.
Yeah.
And I got on Raggedy Ann and Andy being an assistant to Art Babbitt.
Mm.
Now, for those out there that don't know who Art Babbitt is or was, because he's passed away, um, he animated um, the Wicked Queen in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He animated Geppetto in Disney's Pinocchio. He animated the mushrooms in the Nutcracker Suite in Fantasia. He was a living legend. So I worked with him on Raggedy Ann and Andy, and and then I switched about halfway through the picture. I switched to another animator, but I stayed for the whole picture. And movie came out, and it did what it did. But after working on Raggedy Ann and Andy, I mean, I could look at my three jobs in the business and go, well, I was here, and then I was here, and then I was here. What's next? And there really was only one thing left as far as I was concerned, and that was Disney Studios. So I submitted a portfolio. I'll tell you, I'm going to digress for a moment. When I was in school in Chicago, Eric Larson, one of the famous Nine Old Men, was just starting up the Eric Larson Walt Disney Training Program, which became an extremely famous thing. And so I was in Chicago in 72 and 73. I came out to LA in the fall of 73. So Eric shows up at our school and, hands out the first brochures of, come to Disney, get in and go through if you can get through the training program, you have a job with us, and da 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 da. So the year before I actually moved out to Disney, I mean to Los Angeles, I came out just to sort of check out Arts Center, and I gave Eric a call. Now, one of the funny things, if you entered Disney at that particular time, the contact person at Walt Disney Studios was a guy named Don Duckwall. Now, you can imagine if you're in art school and they say, if you ever come out to Los Angeles, here's a number, call Don Duckwall. And you think, well, that must be the studio joke. They've got somebody, Joe Schmo, sitting behind a desk at a phone, and just for yucks, they've called him Don Duckwall. It's just, the coincidence is just too much. But he really was a guy named Don Duckwall. And he was kind of in charge of studio animation operations. So I called him up. I said, hello, I'm David Block. And Eric said if I ever make it out to Los Angeles, to give him a call and stop by the studio. So it was arranged, and Eric met me for lunch at the studio. And so this was I think this must have been a summer of 72, something like that. And so that whole program was just ramping up. So he shows me around, and of course I'm completely gobsmacked. I just like, oh my God, I've reached heaven here. And he took me to lunch in the famous Walt Disney Studios commissary.
Yeah.
And we're going through the line, and there's this little man walking in front of me. I'm literally right behind him in the commissary line. And he's wearing a purple Nehru shirt, a bolo tie, a seersucker sport coat, and he's got these thick round glasses and this thatch of white hair, and he just looks like a walking cartoon character. And so we finished going through the line, and lo and behold, Eric leads me over, and we sit at the table with him, and he says, Dave, this is Ward Kimball. For those of you who are Disney fans out there, Ward Kimball was also one of the Nine Old Men, and in my humble opinion, maybe the best of all of them. He was certainly my hero. So to meet him on the first moments of going to visit Disney Studios, I was out of my mind. Anyway, so fast forward, um, it took me 3 tries to get into Disney Studios. And then I did get in April of 1977, and was accepted into the Eric Larson training program. Do you want to stop and ask a question? I'm just rattling off here.
Keep going. Yeah, it was like, because
Okay.
I think we're going to is that you eventually your first job at Disney was Pete's Dragon, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's right. So I got through the training program, and it's do or die. It's succeed or go home. And but they once I finished the program, which is 8 weeks, by the way,
Hmm.
you do 2 animation tests, and they're in my case the tests are shown in front of the 9 old men.
Hmm.
There were still the people that were still there at the studio. Milt Kahl had retired. Les Clark had died.
Hmm.
John Lounsbury had died. But Frank and Ollie were still there. Wooly Reitherman was still there. Eric was still there. Ward was still there, but he wasn't on the review committee anymore.
Hmm.
But anyway, great legendary people were on that review. And so the minute I finished, they knew my background. They knew I was not fresh out of school, that I had been an assistant for Art Babbitt and worked on Raggedy Ann and Andy and blah blah blah. So they had deadlines. They had Pete's Dragon in production. So they threw me right on that. They went, well, Block, we don't even have to train him. The guy knows what he's doing. So let's throw him on Pete's Dragon. So I did rough in betweens and stuff like that for Pete's Dragon. I was actually, oh, it doesn't. I was working on scenes from various people that would eventually become my contemporaries. But back then, the director Ron Clements, who would go on to direct Gray Mouse Detective and Little Mermaid and Aladdin and
Yeah.
Hercules and so on and so forth. He was an animator back then, and a good one, a really good one. And I worked on some of his scenes. So we finished Pete's Dragon, and then I went on to The Fox and the Hound,
Yeah.
um, and became an animator by the time Fox and the Hound completed itself. So my very first screen credit at Disney was as an animator on The Fox and the Hound.
I
And
have to ask about that. So, I know also that was the first credit for a young man named John Lasseter, who do you guys have some stories on that film or with him or?
well, John came in on the second wave of CalArts people,
Hmm.
and he was assisting Randy Cartwright, if memory serves me. So John did not animate on the
No.
Fox and the Hound. He was doing rough in betweens for Randy, and he eventually would get some scenes to animate. He was what we called an animating assistant on Mickey's Christmas Carol.
Okay.
So there's a couple of scenes in there. I even remember one for sure that John did.
Hmm.
And so after Fox and the Hound, we've completed that. And then there was this really big movie that we had been anticipating and we're all very excited about. It's going to be kind of epic, we hoped. And it was called The Black Cauldron.
Hmm.
And going into that movie, most of us have read the books.
Yes.
There were 5 or 6 books, and 5 books.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Prydain Chronicles, they were called.
Yep.
And I, for one, really got excited about the books.
Yeah.
And we were really excited about it. It was going to be kind of, well, we thought of it as being like our Sleeping Beauty,
Hmm.
maybe. And uh, so as that started to roll out, it didn't take very long for us to realize that there were some early signs that the movie was not going to be as good as we wanted it to be.
Sure.
Uh, the the leadership, the artistic leadership of that film was making some very bad decisions.
Okay.
Um, uh, and among them was they said they didn't want Glenn Keane on the movie.
Mm. Okay.
You got to be an idiot to
Well,
ever want
I'm not
Glenn
asking you
Keane
to
on
throw
the
anyone under
movie.
the bus here, but are you talking more with the directors, or was it Ron Miller or someone like who's
It was the directors. It
okay.
was the directors and the producer. Um, and so, uh, and there were a couple of other people that either said they didn't want to work on the movie, or the artistic leadership said we don't want them on the movie. They're going to be a problem for us,
Mhm.
from a standpoint of morale. They're already they're already questioning our decisions.
Mhm.
So one of the ways you could lobby for yourself on a movie was to spend your nights and weekends doing a personal test, aka a pencil test.
Mhm.
And you pick your character that you were lobbying for, and you do this on your own time, and then you go in and show the directors, and they go, "Wow, you did this on your own time? Wow, great." So I did the lead. I wanted to work on the lead. Why not? And I showed it to one of the directors who will forever be nameless. And he felt that my take on this character didn't line up with his take on the character.
Mhm.
And so I literally came out of that office and said, I got to get off this movie.
Mhm.
And of course, and the only thing there beyond Black Cauldron was Mickey's Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And in truth, looking back now, I don't know why. Well, we were so hopeful for Black Cauldron; it was going to be so fantastic. And then there was this little film called Mickey's Christmas Carol
Mhm.
with Mickey and Donald and Scrooge and Goofy, and so Glenn was on Mickey's Christmas Carol, and Randy Cartwright was on Christmas Carol, and some of the other guys who had a couple years on me, and of course everyone had the utmost respect for Glenn. So I went, I gotta get on Christmas Carol,
Mhm.
and I did. I managed to get on,
Yep.
and truly one of the great moments in my career.
Mhm.
And I had a wonderful time, and it kind of set me up in a nice way, because now I was one of the few who animated on Mickey's Christmas Carol.
Mhm.
That was that turned out to be a prestigious thing.
Yeah.
I'm now standing shoulder to shoulder with Glenn and Randy and a guy named Dale Bear. And Lassiter was an animating assistant on that.
Mhm.
But anyway, it became a real feather in my cap
Yeah.
to have animated it. Oh, and Mark Henn. Let's not forget Mark Henn. Um, and that was kind of his first coming out as
Mhm.
far as how good he was.
Yeah.
Um, so when Mickey's Christmas Carol finished, Mark and I went on to Black Cauldron uh, together. Our first day was together on Black Cauldron, but we had now gained some real respect among our peers, and we had also missed about 2 years of having to work on the Black Cauldron, which was going down the toilet. Um, so even though we had to work on Black Cauldron, we both got really good. I mean, if there was such a thing as getting good scenes on Black Cauldron or good characters, Mark and I did pretty well. Um, I Mark and I shared the introduction to a character called Fluter Flam.
Hmm.
He was a minstrel who, if he lied, the strings would break on his harp.
Yeah.
I did the first scenes of Fluter Flam, and I also did the introduction to Hanwin, the pig, who kind of sets the whole story going. So to get those two characters on on that movie, that was I was doing fine. Um, so Mark and I started on Cauldron together, and we ended Cauldron together. We got in late, and we got to leave early.
Yeah.
And we both went on to The Great Mouse Detective, which was actually originally called Basil of Baker Street.
Yeah.
And Mark and I still call it Basil of Baker Street. But anyway, we went on Basil of Baker Street together. And and uh, and then soon thereafter, we got started. Mark and I got in on Great Mouse Detective really early.
Hmm.
So we were getting like the first sequence that was greenlit to storyboard. Um, but ironically, that sequence was later cut out of the film. So we did some animation that never made it to the screen. Um, and at that about that same time, there was this huge turnover, this huge happening at Disney. And what happened was Roy Disney came in and pulled off a coup
Yeah.
where he sent Ron Miller and Card Walker packing,
Yeah.
and he came in with Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and probably at the same time Frank Wells. And Jeffrey Katzenberg now was going to be head of all of motion pictures, and that included us. And so Jeffrey Katzenberg calls the animators into a room in the original animation building. Oh, I should just throw out. So my office in the animation building, the original,
Hmm.
I had up iWorks' old office.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really, it
Yeah.
was really great. Yeah, yeah, I was really proud of that. Um, so Jeffrey Katzenberg calls us the animators, and there were only like 26 of us,
Hmm.
animators in the whole thing. And he says, "I want your building. I'm taking your building,
Mm.
and we're moving you off the lot." And it was just like, "Excuse me? You know, if you look outside the building, it says animation on the front of the building, and you're kicking us out?" And he did. And he sent us to this god awful building that still exists. It became the Animation Research Library. But
Hmm.
he sent us to this horrible building over in Glendale. And so early on, the building was still under construction and we were having to move into it. It was unbelievable. So Mark and I moved, we were one of the early ones to move to the new building because that's where Basil was going to set up. And but the rest of the studio was still finishing up Black Cauldron. So even though I had my new office over in this building over in Glendale, I would have to make trips back to the studio to see my assistant work, to see the scenes being cleaned up that
Hmm.
I did on Black Cauldron. And on one occasion, I was coming down the hallway in the animation building on the lot, and this very tall man was coming the other way, and I recognized him, and he recognized me. And we had met back in the days when I worked for Abe Levito. Had a couple lunches together with him, and like I said, he remembered me, and he had been newly hired by Michael Eisner to create a new division
Mm.
at Walt Disney Studios
See where this is going.
called Walt Disney TV Animation.
Yeah.
His name was Michael Webster. And he sees me in the hall and he goes, David Block? And I go, Michael Webster? And so we exchanged cordial hellos. And he said, if you have a minute, I'd like to talk to you in my office. And I did, you know. So I went to talk to him. And right on the spot, he said, I'm looking for someone from features to help me create Walt Disney TV animation. And what I'm looking for is someone willing. We're going to be subcontracting a studio in Tokyo, Japan to do our very first show. And what would you think about doing that for us, doing that for me? And it was like, what? Um, but it was a very interesting offer. And it came at a time when we were devastated when Katzenberg kicked us out of this studio. Just devastated. And he even made statements like, and I'm paraphrasing, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with you guys. Because he had no interest in animation whatsoever. So, he's already physically kicking us out. He's making these vague comments like, I don't know what to do with you. And you're starting to wonder if Basil may be the last movie Disney ever makes.
Jeez.
Um, so this offer from Michael Webster looked really interesting. And I had never been on the ground floor of a new division at Walt Disney Studios. I mean, how often does that ever happen? So, but at the same time, my stock was going up in feature animation. I'd gotten onto Basil early, and back then they were going to. It was a very different format if you were an animator. Um, the days of you get one character and you do that character all the way through the movie, that was not happening back then. You'd be handed a scene. If there were three characters in the scene, you did all three characters. You weren't specializing in one character. You did all three, or all four, or all two, whatever. And so there was a sequence in Basil that I was being um, thought about seriously of doing the whole sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one where if you remember the movie, Basil, so towards the end of the movie, Basil and Watson have been hoodwinked by Ratigan, and they're tied to a mouse trap.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this Rube Goldberg thing that's going to happen and eventually kill them. That was going to be a sequence that I was going to take the whole thing. So that was, it's like, wow, that's great. That would be great. So I was weighing these things in my head, and but the ultimately I decided to take the job of helping to create Disney TV animation, and it turned out to be the right decision. Um, and so I had to give features a 3 month notice.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to piss anybody off, and so on I guess it was like April or May of 1985, I left features and went over to TV, and there was a show that was being developed called Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears.
Yeah.
And we hated that title.
Yeah.
But Michael Eisner had given us this no debate proclamation that his kids loved the candy.
Yeah.
And he didn't care what the show was about. He wanted it to be called Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears.
So yeah, like that's I've always so Gummy Bears was a little bit before my time. In fact, I actually just watched like an episode of it on Disney Plus for the first time. But I've always heard about how it's like this great example of the most ludicrous concept, the most ludicrous idea of let's cash in on a gummy, candy, and you just get the right writer to come in and you make actually a pretty good show. So I mean, it's a great example of how you can make spin gold out of straw, so to speak.
It had nothing to do with the candy at all. Fortunately, the guys that developed the script for it said we're just going to ignore the whole candy thing, and we're going to come up with really a show that was very ambitious and had a lot of layers to it. These bears have this long pack back history to them, and it's kind of like Sword in the Stone meets the Seven Dwarfs. I mean, the dwarves, the bears were like the dwarves, and it takes place in medieval times. And for a Saturday morning show, I remember reading the pilot. I read the pilot in a in a room. I was locked into a room and um, told to read the pilot, and I came out. I told Michael Webster, "This is insane to try to do this as a Saturday morning show because the backgrounds were drop dead gorgeous, very difficult to paint. This was not a simple show. This was not the Flintstones at all. And but I won't go off on that. So I came into the show, and my job was to take the show to Japan and train a studio to be able to animate on a much higher level than what was considered normal at that time. But when I came to the show in whatever month that was, either April or May of '85, a lot of the key characters had not been designed yet. So they were in a desperate place, and I ended up designing a lot of the characters. Not I did a pass. I did a final pass on the bears and did the model sheets for the bears, and then I had to do Kevin and do Gigthorn. I had to come up with what they were going to look like. So I did Kevin, Duke Gigthorn, King Gregor, um, a couple of other really key characters, and then I took the show to Japan. Um, and we had hired a very capable studio. Um, and so they chose very well. And they definitely had the potential to do great things. And so what was very rewarding was when I came back from my 6 months over there of overseeing the whole show. I was getting calls. I I I had never done Saturday morning before, but I got a fast education in it because all the overseas studios were very used to the methods of Hanna-Barbera and Filmation.
Mhm.
And I decided if I'm supervising this thing, I'm throwing that rule book right out the window. I don't want this to look like Hanna-Barbera Filmation. It's got to be way better than that. And so I started creating new rules. And one of them, among many, was the dialogue. Um, Back in the days of the Flintstones, there was basically something called ABCD mouse, which was, I won't go into it, but it's just a very generalized, unindividualistic way of doing things on a low budget,
Mhm.
and it works. It can work, but it was a set of like four mouths that you
Sure.
do for any character. And I think I came up with nine.
Mhm.
My model sheets had 9 mouths. So when gummy bears came back and people started seeing the first tests, they went, "How the hell is Block doing that?" And so that was very rewarding to get calls from people. Some of them I had never met before, going, "How in the hell are you doing that?" And I would act out a lot of the characters for the Japanese because they didn't speak English.
Yeah.
Um, so in a handout of a show, it would take me all day to do the handout. And I was often acting out all the characters in all the scenes, and they would videotape me. And it worked great. And they were a great bunch of people. And the show really was a big hit.
Yep.
Um, and so after my time in Japan, I went back. Michael sent me back for one more short trip. I told him I didn't want to stay in Japan for another season. Um, but I did kick off the second season. And then I came back and got promoted to director. And I was put on DuckTales,
Yeah.
which was an even bigger show than
Yeah.
Gummy Bears. DuckTales was ended up being a phenomenon.
Yeah. Of
And
course.
it was a unbelievable show to have as your first directing gig. That show, as ambitious as Gummy Bears was, it couldn't hold a candle to DuckTales.
And
It
you were
was,
directing.
it
Sorry, I
was
didn't mean to. You were directing like so.
yeah,
If you don't mind me saying, I've been actually watching DuckTales on Disney Plus this year, and as I watched the episode, I noticed your name. You're directing basically every other episode. You're basically direct trading off with Alan Zaslov and directing every other show.
right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
So
And by the way, Alan Zaslov was the guy. As long as you brought him up, he became a very good friend of mine, and he was the man who introduced me to Ben Washam
okay.
back in the day.
Okay.
So that was the connection.
Okay.
Who knew that we would end up working together
Hmm.
years later? Um, so DuckTales was really a big deal and really a big hit. And I went from DuckTales. The next thing I directed, um, I went on to The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which was again another big show because that was the first time we were well, DuckTales was really big too, but we were taking Winnie the Pooh
Yeah, exactly.
and doing something Saturday morning with him. So they wanted me on that. Um, and then I went back to Gummy Bears because Gummy Bears was really a personal thing for me. And I wanted to direct the show. And so I did the last, I want to say the last maybe 3 seasons of Gummy Bears, maybe. Um, and then I'll move this whole thing along. I then there this then Roger Rabbit hit.
Yeah.
Uh, and the president of our division had this sketchy idea. Let's do a Saturday morning show that mimics Roger Rabbit.
If you're,
Um,
are we going into bonkers now?
we're going into
Okay.
bonkers, and that was in theory that sounds great, but it can't work unless you're willing to have live action and animation combination.
Hmm.
And Bonkers couldn't afford to do that. He said, well, we'll have drawings of people, and the audience will think, oh, they're real people. No, they're not real people. They're drawings. You can't do it. But he insisted that we do it. There's a lesser known fact. Bonkers, before we actually did the series, did a theatrical short. I'll bet no one out there has ever seen it. But it's a short. It's 7 minutes. It's like a Tex Avery cartoon.
Huh.
And it was like the big kickoff for Bonkers, and I directed that. I co-wrote and directed it, and that was a lot of fun. Um, and then I did Bonkers, and after Bonkers, things started to shift at TV a bit. Uh, we were up until Bonkers, we were really leaders in the Saturday morning world. Our shows looked so much better than anybody else's. Our concepts were better than anybody else's. And then Warner Brothers came along with Batman and the Animaniacs.
And everything that Spielberg was producing at that time was crazy. Yeah. So,
Right. And our president, who had that bonkers concept, started to wanting to mimic what Warner Brothers was doing.
mhm.
So he put into development a show called Gargoyles
Yeah.
that was supposed to look like Batman.
Hmm.
He even hired some of those Warner Brother people from Batman to come over and develop Gargoyles so that it looked like Batman. And then the other show that he put into development was called Quack Pack, which was kind of a bad spin-off of DuckTales. At least I thought so. And I thought, it's time to leave. It's it's like this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Features was killing it.
Hmm.
Features had gone through the Renaissance.
Yeah.
While I was gone, they made some clunkers, but they also made some killers.
Yeah.
They did Little Mermaid, they did Beauty and the Beast, and they did Aladdin. And I started looking over there and going, you know, I wish I were there for some of those movies. So I approached some old friends, colleagues, John Musker and Ron Clements, and I said, what about my coming back? And they said, sure, we'll take, we're doing a film called Hercules.
Hmm.
And so they were so kind, and they took me back. And so after 10 years of directing at Disney TV, I went back to features. And I went on to Hercules and had a wonderful time on Hercules. Maybe the best time ever of all my. I had some really great years, but Hercules was really, really fun.
Mhm.
And then when that finished, I actually was being considered um, for supervising animator, which was a wonderful thing. And I first went on to Tarzan, um, and then I was promoted to work on a film called Kingdom in the Sun.
This is going to cross over a lot with my good buddy Steve Anderson. When I interviewed him, a lot of this because he entered on Tarzan and he talked a lot about Roger Allers, who just passed away at the time of this recording. And
Yeah.
he talked a lot about that. But by all means, go ahead.
Well, Roger had done The Lion King,
Hmm.
and a lot of years had gone by, and this was going to be his follow-up, Kingdom in the Sun. It was going to be a very epic movie, and he had gotten Sting to write music for it, just like Phil Collins had been hired to do Tarzan.
Hmm.
And it was going to be a big deal, and I was going to be a supervising animator on A Kingdom in the Sun. And it would take at least 2 hours to talk about what happened to A Kingdom in the Sun.
Oh wow.
But Kingdom in the Sun didn't happen.
Hmm.
And Roger left the studio.
Hmm.
Um, and A Kingdom in the Sun became The Emperor's New Groove. And so I was put on, I stayed on and ended up animating a lot of Kronk
Okay.
in uh, uh, Emperor's New Groove. And then from that movie, I went on to um, Treasure Planet. And then about that time, things were really changing. The Florida studio that had done Mulan and Brother Bear and Lilo and Stitch, they were shut down,
Hmm.
and all those people were laid off.
Yeah. I know Steve had to go. Steve had to move back to California. He told me that. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people lost their jobs, and the Paris studio was shut down. They had been hired. They had been bought and taken over by Disney back in like 1992, 93, and they were shut down. Um, and and CG was coming.
Yeah. CG was coming. I like that. I
It
like the
was
way you phrased
coming.
that. It's coming.
It's coming.
Thank you, John Lasseter.
Yeah. And so Treasure Planet, uh, two unfortunate things happened. Uh, the management was really thinking, well, Shrek had just won the Oscar for
Yeah.
Best Animated Film. That was the first year that the Academy created that division for Best Animated Film. And Shrek won, and it was CG. And we were starting to make some bad movies
Hmm.
in traditional animation. Atlantis was not a good movie. Brother Bear did not do well. And then Treasure Planet really didn't do well. And it was like a trifecta. And they said, we got to stop making traditionally animated films. We're going to go CG. So a lot of us then, well, people were getting laid off before Treasure Planet. As they were coming off of Atlantis, there was a big layoff. The Florida studio got shut down. So there were layoffs. You could see it coming.
Yeah.
And after Treasure Planet, I was laid off.
Mm.
So I immediately, I got lucky. Kind of. No, not kind of. I did. Um, I immediately looked back to TV animation and got hired to direct on the second season of Kim Possible, which was an amazing show.
Yeah.
I was, I mean, that was a one great show. The scripts were hysterical. They were really well written. The show was really well designed. And I had a really good time directing on that show. I felt very blessed. So after that second season, then I segued on to directing DVDs. That was kind of a trend. Uh, putting out DVDs. Like sequels to some of our feature animated stuff. So I did some directing on some of the DVDs,
Hmm.
and I did that for a couple of years. And then my final years at Disney were working in a division, very small division called Special Projects, and where I was the one and only animator, and I was doing a lot of things for the parks. Animating for Hong Kong Disneyland,
Mm.
Shanghai Disneyland, and Florida Disney World.
Yeah.
And that was pretty cool. I mean, it was like, all right, my career has gone from features to TV to features back to TV, DVD, but now millions of people are seeing my work every day because they're going to the parks in droves.
Hmm.
And one of the last things I did the Snow White Mine Coaster ride in Florida, where if you've ever seen the ride, all the dwarves are singing like hi ho, hi ho. And that was all traditionally animated. And then they took my animation and put it in some kind of a digital process where it's scanned and put into these high definition projectors and projected onto the blank faces of the dwarves. So it's not CG, it's real animation, and it looked great. It looked really cool. So all of my work is in that ride. And then one of the last things I got to do, which was a great way to go out, um, was I did all the animation for Shanghai Peter Pan.
Oh,
And Peter Pan had always been my absolute drop dead favorite animated Disney feature. And I can remember when my boss said, we're going to ask you to do a whole bunch of animation for this new ride. And I said, and I'm going to get paid for doing this? Uh, it was just an absolute dream to animate Tinkerbell, animate Pan,
yeah.
fighting Hook. And that was awesome. That was just the best. And so after 33 years, um, I finally came to the end of my life with Disney
Mhm.
and did a couple other things after that. And then I retired.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, that's it's an odyssey, as they say. But yeah, there's one thing I wanted to touch on because you answered a lot of the questions, like I was talking about, looking at your filmography, again, I was going to ask, like, you kind of go from back and forth from TV to features, and then well, you definitely answered that. And yeah, you did do some Scooby-Doo stuff, some stuff for Nick.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, I did the Warner Brothers thing. Yeah, I was there for almost 2 years. Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, the one thing that I was really interested about, because one of my big fascinations in life is unmade films or unrealized projects. In fact, Steve and I just did a bit of a show on the unrealized Disney films over the years. And there's a series you were doing at the time that was called the Disney Princess Enchanted Tales, which is really fascinating to me because there was a this is actually you and I kind of opened up and started conversing when we first kind of met online about this
Uh-huh.
because I'm really kind of
Uh-huh.
fascinated by it because there was a film, entire film that was made, produced, advertised, and then
The,
never,
the
yeah.
Cinderella one or the Beauty and the Beast one?
Well, according to this, so here's what I have in my notes. Okay, so it's like
Okay.
the very first one that was actually advertised. There were commercials out here for this that it was coming was called The Kingdom of Kindness, and the two features were Aurora and Belle.
Right. That was the first one.
Right, and that never got released, and they just decided to
Right.
release the second one, which was Follow Your Dreams, and that's the only one. And then
Uh-huh.
that one has an advertisement in it for the next chapter, which I don't think ever had a title, with which featured Mulan and Cinderella.
Correct.
And then you personally told me that there was a fourth one that was being storyboarded with Ariel, and I don't think you ever said who the second one was besides Ariel.
Oof. Definitely Ariel. And it was really cute. Um, uh, I can't remember right offhand at this moment. Yeah. So we were going to do these set of four
Hmm.
DVDs. And um, the woman who was in charge of the DVD division, and
Hmm.
I'll name her. Her name was Sharon Morrill,
Hmm.
and she was a horrible human being. Um, and she had not greenlit this project.
Hmm.
Uh, our executive producer on these princess DVDs, he had gone around her. He was very clever, and he had his background was in features. He came out of features, and he knew how to get around her, and he did. Um, and we had a smaller budget than what we were working with, a real tough budget. And so, all right, how do I explain all this? All right, so the first one that you mentioned, um, um, that one went to a studio in Korea, which is frightening. To give a studio in Korea characters like Belle and Aurora,
Hmm.
and and so when that film was came back, we had no supervisor over there. We were working blind. Um, so when that came back, it was correctly deemed in it could not be shown. It could not be released. It was that bad. And so we just shelved it. And then the second one got sent to a different studio in a different country. And that one I could control. I insisted on going over and doing some lectures, and that studio was up and coming, and they hit the potential. You just needed to be a little patient with them. And I had become kind of this expert on dealing with overseas because of my years in Japan. And so I had a knack for that, and they knew that. And they were skeptical that this other country could do it. And I said, no, I think they can. And they did. They did fine. So we released the one with Jasmine and Aurora,
Hmm.
and that came out. And then the next one was walking a very fine line. Each one of those went to a different country. So the third one was in China, and I was concerned about it, but we made some trips, and it would have taken a lot of retakes, but we could have done it. But about that time, we had finished the second one. The third one was in the works, and we had promoted it. It showed up in Pencil Test or something. Some early footage showed up on the tail end of the Jasmine and Aurora DVD.
Yeah.
Um, and our executive producer, the one who had gone around Sharon Morrill,
Hmm.
he left the project. Um, and so when he left the project, we didn't have him to protect us
Mm.
anymore. And Sharon just swooped in like a hawk and said, "You're done here. I'm closing you down. I'm shutting the whole production down. Even though you have stuff overseas and you've completely finished the storyboard on the fourth one, I'm taking you out." And she did. She did, and it 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 was a very cold-hearted thing she did, and for some of my staff, it took them about a year to recover emotionally from it because we were all so committed to it, and to be told with like pack your by be out of your office in 48 hours kind of thing. It was just so rude, and that's what happened.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you've taken that's great. And like I said, it's almost like an OCD thing. Like I can't stand to see trailers and photos of something and then like, oh, it was never released. Like, so
And
that's always been an area of fascination for me.
we were on the verge. I was starting to meet with all of the merchandising people at Disney Consumer Products because they were going to merchandise these, take these stories and do more things with them, and come out with storybooks, based on the DVDs. And um, it was an exciting time. We were, it was it was a risk to take these classic characters and turn them into shorter stories.
Mhm.
I have real I have some issues about, marketing, taking a classic character out of a Disney feature and doing something less than that with it.
Mhm.
But we were all having a very good time. It was a wonderful crew. Every day was just so much fun to come to work. We were all so committed to these things. I had a wonderful time, and the people I was working with were fantastic. And it was really neat to um, come up with stories and then, use the art direction from the original movies, or Sleeping Beauty, do Ivan Earl like backgrounds. Oh God, it was
Yeah.
fantastic. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a tough time. That was a tough time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so as you say, you retired after that, and I hope you're enjoying a well-deserved retirement. But I guess my final question would be just about the state of what any comments you have on the state of Disney right now, because and I'll sort of set the stage for this in a little bit, or I'll say this. You talk about sort of the dark ages of you didn't even mention Home on the Range, but sort of the dark ages there, and then uh, after that, there was, Lasseter joined up, and there was the what they call the second Disney Renaissance. They had a great golden age, and then Lasseter left, for lack of a better term, and Jennifer Lee took over. And let's just be honest, there's been some stinkers since then. Now she's out, and there's a new guy in, Jared Bush. We're just kind of starting a new era. I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on where you think things are going, and anything, what recommendations you would have for your fellow animators out there to make the best Disney show as possible.
Um, I don't know Jared Bush.
Mhm.
I do know Byron Howard. Byron Howard, I was actually important in his career in helping him get into Disney. And Byron has been extremely successful with Zootopia and Zootopia 2. Zootopia 2 made more than Zootopia 1.
Yeah.
And um, I'm still on the fence as far as where is Disney going. Um, and I don't think Jared Bush has had enough time to prove himself. Um, so I've been away now from Disney for a while, and so I'm not really up to speed on what the direction of animation is at Disney Studios. Um, there's all these rumors flying around that they're going to put traditional animation back into the studio, and I'll believe that when I see it. There has been such a long lag uh, where schools aren't even really pushing that. Traditional animation really didn't die in Europe or in Asia, but it sure as hell died here in the United States.
Mhm.
And there were many very sad young people going into animation who wanted to do traditional, and there was no place for them to go when they got out of school. Um, so where animation is, I'm not sure. Um, I am very biased towards traditional animation. I certainly admire a good CG film, but I think traditional animation is so much more beautiful than CG. The organicness of it and the hand drawn look is just gorgeous. It's what I wanted to do, and I was never going to be able to embrace CG personally. That's not. I mean, it to me it took all the fun out of it. Uh, the whole idea. I mean, just the concept of a CG animator gets this kind of mannequin to move, and he's not going to be doing the hair. He's not going to be doing the clothing. That's somebody else, and that just like, well, where's the fun in that? Um, and so I don't know, Ryan. I don't really have an opinion. on that. Um, I think it's very valid to say that the minute traditional animation started making some bad films, the executives were so quick to say, people don't want to see it traditional. It wasn't that they didn't want to see traditional; they didn't want to see a bad film. And then CG comes along, and obviously they've had some really good films, but they've had more than their share of bad films. And those same executives aren't saying, "See, the people don't want to see CG." No, people don't want to see bad films, and that can go CG way or traditional. But I think it's a damn shame that the executives were so quick to turn their backs on traditional animation. It's such a beautiful thing.
Well, I think that's a great place to sort of leave things because that's your background, and hope maybe we'll see. I think Winnie the Pooh was the last, as of 2026, the last traditionally animated. That was 15 years ago, so we'll see. But it's been a great having you on the show, and I just want to thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Mr. David Block, everybody, what did you think of our show? Did you have any questions of your own? Maybe someday we'll get to ask them. Please let us know in the comments. And until next time, I'm Ryan Murphy, and thank you for keeping it real with Real Time.
Bye.